Hey guys, yesterday you would have wrapped up some of the actual war parts of the Civil War in Pennsylvania. Today we're going to start to dive into the legacy and the impacts of the war. Also, if you notice, am doing another like live raw, kind of like a lecture on this. I do apologize because as I said before, I think it's better when I pre-record and plan and add the images and everything else, titles. But this is what we have at least for today. So let's go to the bell ringer to start. All right. Number one, explain what you know about Reconstruction. This is often one of the topics that the book covers very poorly, so I'm actually super curious to see what your answers are. I can't wait. Number two, how would you describe race relations today? Again, another very interesting question that I'm excited to see what you have to say. Now, at this point, please pause the video and take some time to think about it and answer it in comments on Google Classroom. All right. With these bell ringer questions, slavery, the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement, and so on, it's a huge and messy but very powerful part of our history that still impacts us today. I use these questions because I want you guys to think about it, and I want to actually know what you know. We can examine the data today that tells us about race and race relations, and even the public's view on all of this. One second. Some of the data that I can show you is from 2018, but for instance, the population, about a third of our population would think racism isn't a problem, but it still does exist. About 25% of our population, as of again 2 years ago, think racial discrimination against blacks isn't serious or not very serious. About half of the population would say that relations never really or very rarely come up in conversation with friends and family. Clearly, this stuff still touches our lives today in the U.S. We know this. There's Black Lives Matter. There's the incident in Charlottesville. We still have, affirmative action and the Antifa versus alt-right. There's police brutality. There's mass incarceration of African Americans, or even if we're just thinking of kneeling during the NFL. These are all issues that we still discuss, debate. Oftentimes, they even become heated. But anyway, it's important for us today to view the stats on race and race relations. Here's a good source to start with, the NAACP. They can give you good stats. These are actually, again, I think from last year, but you can go check it out for yourself with the updated versions. It's very, very interesting. When we look at some of these stats, they're not very good and they're very telling. What we need to do as historians is find the causes and the roots to this, which hopefully should be self-evident to you guys. For instance, when we take all these measurements and we trace them back, we have to determine how much of this is from the historic, wrong that our government and businesses and individuals, carried out on an entire race of people. This is what the open question is. Anyway, with all these stats, which are very telling again, very tragic, we will continue to discuss and debate throughout time to figure these out and to make these stats as close as possible of what they should be. So it's very interesting. Outside of these stats, another interesting measurement that we should take a look at, if I'm getting to it here soon, you can always pause the video and check these out. Come on, where is it? There we go. Another useful measurement for us to see is just public opinion. So a lot of these are from Pew Research Center, but we can even get stuff from Gallup poll. So whether these are based on facts, like, this could be a fact. This is still a fact, but these are opinions. So the fact is, this is what people believe. Now, is what they believe true? Well, this is true. This is what people believe to be true. So they're both real. They're both real. Just, this might not necessarily be based in fact. But this is also very important, very crucial for us to also study what do people actually think. So I know I'm scrolling through these, but it's just so if you are interested, you can just pause the video and check it out. That's all. Anyway, clearly race is an issue that we still deal with. Historically, it easily points to the roots of slavery and even the Jim Crow era, the Reconstruction, and so on, even the Civil Rights Movement. And this is just like, basically one person away. If we're even talking about the 60s, 70s, and 80s, some of the ways the government's providing equal opportunities, just a person away, just one older generation away. So it's still close to us, and this is going to take generations to fix. Anyway, this is kind of what we're going to get into. Just the Civil War's legacy. Again, we still feel this stuff today, so it is very important, and it's again a very, very interesting but tough one throughout our history. Our objectives for today is just to look at the cost of war in PA and the nation, and we'll also explain the Civil War amendments. More so tomorrow, we'll discuss Reconstruction. Here are your key terms. So the amendments, Reconstruction, Jim Crow laws, sharecropping, and segregation. All right. So to start with the war's impacts, clearly there's a lot of casualties, there's a lot of dead. This is almost split in the middle. There actually are more Union deaths. For Pennsylvania, there's about 30,000 deaths. Interesting fact about these deaths, when we actually look at who was killed on the battlefield, it's kind of just on the upwards of 200,000. So pretty much for every one that died on the battlefield, 2 died from disease. And I say it all the time, but disease is definitely a better killer for us historically than we are at killing each other. That's for sure. Another cost is an actual cost, a money cost, $6.7 billion. The country would be demolished, it would be damaged, especially the South, especially some of the southern Pennsylvania cities. If we think of Chambersburg, if we think of Gettysburg, and a few others, the Fairfield, the Hanover, some Carlisle, some of the local other places in Pennsylvania. Another huge impact, clearly, essentially 4 million slaves would be free citizens with rights from the newly formed amendments. Now, I kind of put this part in the essentially because actually it's not quite true. They're not slaves, but they're basically servants. Even with the 13th Amendment, there's a loophole. There's actually a cool documentary on Netflix called 13th about it. And then even when I say, they're citizens, they have rights, well, it depends, where you're at. It depends on the legislatures, because what they do is set up black codes and Jim Crow laws, and it kind of takes away your rights. And even when we look at the term slaves, what we have later is kind of like a servitude again. When you get into tenant farming or sharecropping, or you even get into convict leasing, which is very controversial as well. With plenty of African Americans saying, if this is freedom, then what was slavery? Just to kind of compare it to say it's the same thing. So it's very interesting because we're not out of the water yet. Civil War, it's kind of just the start for something that'll keep continuing on for another 100 years, right? Anyway, let's keep going. Pennsylvania dealt with rebuilding the South, southern PA, and actually the South, caring for soldiers. This is actually when they diagnosed PTSD. Plenty of soldiers returning, without even limbs. So, what do you do? How do we take care of them? Race relations, clearly, which was mixed in PA. Definitely one of the more tolerant states, but definitely imperfect. In addition to all that, we would also continue the industrial growth. You have to remember the 1800s in general. It's all about like the industrial era. All right. So I got a couple pictures. Everybody likes pictures. I like pictures. This is just showing the destruction of the South. This actually, if you notice, they're attacking like railroads and other buildings. Whether it's the North or the South, and most times in war, what happens is, and you're not supposed to do this, by the way, They adopt a total war approach, like, screw it, we'll just blow up, break everything, if it's a well, if it's a farm, if it's a field, if it's a house, if it's a school, if it's a, infrastructure, a bridge, whatever. And it's a way to basically win the war. Now, again, this is like frowned upon. You're not supposed to. It's actually a war crime. But, all sides do this in all the wars. Whenever they just get sick and tired and they're like, all right, we just want to win. Let's just destroy everything and just make their lives hell. Other pictures of the destruction. These are like actual pictures back then, by the way. They're not fake. Another part of the impacts, and there's more than I just briefly covered, by the way, are the Civil War camps and the deaths from them. This is very interesting because you get so many deaths because of this. By the way, when I say like the Civil War camp is an impact, I'm actually more so looking at the deaths from this from the camps as the impact, not like creating camps after the war. That doesn't quite make sense. But anyway, these were brutal, brutal places. Some of them would have tens of thousands of soldiers, but they would also have tens of thousands of soldiers die at them. Sometimes the death rate might have been 2% at a camp. Sometimes it's, about 33% at some of these camps. So very brutal, disease, poor sanitation, malnutrition, overcrowding. Whether it's a North camp or a South camp, they're pretty much the same. People are often described as walking skeletons. I'll show you a couple pictures. Walking skeletons in what they said, filth and vermin, quote unquote. Another quote, quick one, an easy one for you. Is this hell? So some camps are better than others, clearly. Some camps actually even had their people play sports, for instance. This is actually where they'd make baseball, interestingly enough. Some would give food and clothes and shelter, but outbreaks of disease, super common, super common. So at the end of the war, another like impact related issue to talk about is they have about 400,000 soldiers in these camps. So now, you can release them, you can figure out what to do with them, they can go get back their life. Do they have PTSD? Are they going to get a better salary? Do they have all their limbs? What will life be after? So here's just an example of the Pennsylvania Camp Elder. So this would be the camp that they would make after Gettysburg. All right, so another impact that comes out of the Civil War are 3 amendments, the Civil War amendments, they call them, 13th, 14th, and 15th. 13th would abolish slavery unless you're a convict. That's the kind of the stipulation that people point to say, this is a loophole. Once again, there's a Netflix documentary called 13th. I definitely recommend it. It's very interesting. I might not even offer it as extra credit. So what happens later, I don't want to spoil too much because I'll talk about it later, is you get, a black individual, he's loitering, or he doesn't have his papers of employment, or, maybe he left a plantation again without like papers, or, I don't know, he whistled at a white woman, whatever. They're locked up. Sometimes they don't do anything. They're just accused off the street. They're locked up. Courts, police, they enforce this stuff. It happens all the time, and you get chain gangs, you get, convict leasing, you get these prisons and, government prisons or like private prisons later. You lock them up, and now here is your labor source. It's free. Now you don't even have to take care of them. They could rot, they could die. They're convicts, so nobody cares if you're, quote unquote bad guy. That's kind of the connotation attached to it. So it's actually could be a more brutal form of slavery if you were caught in that loophole. Anyway, 14th Amendment, this would grant citizenship to African Americans and due process, and then the 15th Amendment would actually allow them to vote. But again, there's more to this one, such as later Jim Crow laws, black codes, which actually restricts their voting rights. Contemporary issues have to do with voter ID, but we can talk about that stuff later. Anyway, I'm going to wrap that up for now, and we'll continue through the impacts and Reconstruction, and just like the legacy of the Civil War in general. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it, especially because, I did this live raw video. It's kind of almost like a podcast. So I do appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. All right. Have a good one. Let me know if you have any questions. Take care. Bye.